Fons, can you hear me? Are you there? You are. Fantastic. I can see you, and I think perhaps you can see me on a camera right
Very
at
well.
the end there. Fantastic. We're very delighted to see you from Munich. It's over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. You see how technology can play a role when things go wrong, especially in the world of cloud-based services known as the airline. Anyway, wonderful to be here. And I would like to discuss in 15 to 20 minutes what is important about speed and flexibility in the new world for us as leaders. And to be honest, the type of education we go through doesn't really help us to speed up and to be flexible. Or we only speed up and we are very flexible without taking into consideration the other side of it, namely rigor vis-a-vis flexibility and a bit of reflection when you go for speed. Because my main argument is that our leadership models are all based on bipolar thinking. And bipolar thinking, in a nutshell, is excelled by MBA students, as you know, mediocre but arrogant. And it's wonderful because it has served the world pretty well up until a certain moment. We now see enormous increase of diversity, not so much in quantity, but in awareness of diversity. I live, for example, in the Netherlands, where 60% of people younger than 20 years, and I'm talking about Amsterdam, don't have Dutch parents anymore. And the argument I will make is that the paradigms that we are taught in economics, in almost all kinds of disciplines, including psychology and especially in MBAs, are completely bankrupt. What do I mean with that? Let me give you some examples. First of all, if we look at the history of organization theory, bipolarity, and that means one is excluding the other, has led to crisis after crisis. And it has accelerated lately because we have more crises than normal times. Let me give you a bit of a history. We started with efficiency and effectiveness. You remember scientific management, 1910? Frederick Taylor, Henry Fayol, all looking at how can we increase the effectiveness and efficiency of organizations. If you like, it's a bit where McKinsey is today. And it is wonderful because by its own exaggeration, it was killed. And we got it replaced by the human relations school. You remember Maslow, McGregor, and those kind of people who were completely focused on human motivation. And again, it killed itself by exaggeration. So you got the next crisis filled in by the beginnings of marketing and client focus. This was in the 60s. And it killed itself because they said, gee, we now have efficiency, we have human motivation, we have the client. You know who we forgot? The shareholder. And I remember I wrote an article in 1999 for the Financial Times with the wonderful title, I think, Shareholder Value, the value created for people who never share. And I was predicting it would kill itself. By the way, what will kill itself today? Now, if you promise me not to throw up, I will tell you what the next fashion is. Have you heard of contributions to society? It will kill itself. And let me give you the argument. Any value that is done at the cost of other values kills itself. Shareholder value was done at the cost of the other values. Human relations, it's very important, but if it's done at the cost of other values, it will kill itself. If you only focus on society, it's simple, by the way. I very often advise companies if they say, we have a CO2 emission problem, I say, why don't you stop manufacturing? You know, if that is your problem. And they say, and what you see, and this is very important, that the essence of value creation is how do we integrate opposites, and we call them dilemmas. If I was looking at, final introductory comment, if I was looking at the leadership literature, obviously 95% are written by Americans, because 5% of the world live there. And if you read these books, you say, wow, that is very American, especially if you read a book on leadership by the French. And as you know, in great contrast with the Americans, the French first think and then write. And that's why they only needed one book. But you read the book, and it's all about where do these leaders come from? Did they go to the École Polytechnique? And you say, yeah, it's French, and it works, but in France. And then you take the Chinese, and Chinese leadership, and the literature on that is quite interesting, but it's very Chinese. It's about yin and yang, and it's about the Tao of what have you. And Zen, let me not forget. Now, there was a time that the world was multi-local. The Americans stayed in America, the French stay in France, no comment. The wonderful Chinese stayed in China, and it was fine, because all our half logics, namely making choices in dilemmas, like for the Americans, go and standardize, for the French, no, we are unique, and for the Chinese, let's connect, was working. But now suddenly you realize, and look at your audience here in Munich, you are multicultural. If you have French working together with Americans, with Dutch, with Swedes, with Japanese, in one multicultural team, our leadership paradigms are bankrupt. What we need is a leadership paradigm that I would call servant leadership, that will help you connect opposites. Servant leadership itself is a dilemma that is reconciled. Let me explain the world of servant leadership and the dilemmas that servant leaders need to reconcile. Servant leadership is not a servant. It was based on the work of Greenleaf, and Greenleaf was a guy at AT&T who found out after 30 years of experience that some leaders came to the top, and within about 1 year, they were gone. Non-sustainable leadership. And he found also that some leaders came at the top and stayed there for 20 years in great success. What was the difference between the two types of leaders? Let me start with the question they asked. A non-sustainable leader came in and asked questions to his or her subordinates. Let me ask you what you can do so that I perform better. Non-sustainable leadership. What Greenleaf found is that the question servant leaders ask is, what can I do so that you perform better? And the fun was, by serving, you increase your authority. So it's not serving or leading, it's serving through leading and leading through serving. You will see, for example, that all the big icons in leadership literature that are not technical, but I'm thinking of Mandela, I'm thinking of Gandhi, the old Gandhi, are all people who led through serving. So why have we ignored this in business? And my argument is that servant leaders reconcile dilemmas. They don't add value, but create value by integrating opposites. And that helps them to become more speedy and more flexible. Let me give you 7 examples. Every servant leader has the dilemma between individual creativity and teamwork. A servant leader will try to connect both viewpoints and go to innovation. What is innovation? Innovation is that individuals get their individual creativity and offer them to the team. And vice versa, teams are judged on what they do for increasing the creativity of individuals. How are we not normally trying to resist this thought? By our reward systems. It's all based on individual stuff at the cost of the team. Let me give you an example. I was educated as a PhD at Wharton. And Wharton is a business school, as you know. And I come out of a library. At the time we had libraries. And there was this MBA student, obviously we looked enormously down on them, and he had 8 books under his arm. And I said, wow, that's a heavy exam. He says, yes, tomorrow. I said, tomorrow, 8 books? He said, yes, but I'm not reading them. It's just that other students can't read them. And that is the, if you like, weak side of too much individualism. Ask the Japanese what the problem is of too much group work. It leads to mediocrity. Servant leaders make sure that it's connected, that your reward systems are based on individual creativity, defined by what the individual offers to the team. And teamwork is, let's say, rewarded when teams can show what they have done to the individual. So the individual and the group. Second dilemma that a servant leader reconciles, rapport and rapport. Great leaders, servant leaders, are very sure that you start with rapport, a good French word of trust, pampering people, within which you are tough like a nail. This is the work of Deborah Tannen, who also very much focuses on female and male relationships, and with the very telling title of her bestseller book called You Just Don't Understand. And I very often ask my wife to read it. And it's wonderful because one of the anecdotes is that a male goes to the fridge. The husband takes a can of Coke and starts drinking. And the wife says, honey, can't you ask me if I'm thirsty? Oh, sorry, dear, are you thirsty? She says, no, I'm not. This drives males crazy. Why? Males are more about rapport and females are more about rapport. Great leadership is if you have a context of rapport where you are tough like a nail within that rapport. It's a bit like parents. You can be tough on your kids if it's done in the context of unconditional love. That's what servant leaders do, and it helps you to speed up and to come to flexibility. Emotions and control. Do you want to show passion, or do you want to control your emotions? Be careful for instruments like Myers-Briggs. You know, they measure, are you thinking or feeling? Are you passionate, or are you more in control of your emotions? Great leaders combine the two. Servant leaders will say, gee, I will show passion in the background of control. Look at Richard Branson, very passionate, but gee, he can calculate. Or Michael Dell, he's like almost like a spreadsheet, but you feel the passion in the background. And it's the contrast between the two that makes you a servant leader that can deal with diversity that is so much increasing in this world. I would like to give you 3 more little examples and then come to a conclusion and how to get there. One is, for example, do you need to get diversity in your company to positively discriminate your people? Or would you rather say, no, what we need to do is focus on equal opportunity and measure people on their performance? Both will not work. If you positively discriminate, so you say, let's have females in because they're female, you get the numbers, but it will not serve the cause. If you say, no, we only test people on their performance, then we males that created this male game called business will never get females. And I have a keen reason why I want more females, apart from my sexual orientation, around me. And that is, females are much better in this dilemma thinking and reconciling than males. So there is a business reason why you should first, and this is the work of Thomas and Ally, have quantifications and say we need 40% of females at the top. But then you are making sure that once the females are in, you judge them on their performance. And those two together work. A second major reason for doing this is I have 3 daughters and they need a job. One but last dilemma that I would like to discuss that servant leaders integrate is the world of connecting the inside world with the outside world. And that is so important because organizations like Orange support us in doing this. The technology inside, connecting it to the outside, and obviously it will affect the way we lead. Ask the Arab world, because the problem is if you only go inside and you don't get enough feedback, if you go outside you get too much feedback, and both don't work. What we need to do, and the balance scorecard, by the way, I hate balance. Balance is bipolar thinking. If one goes up, the other goes down, right? It's not something good. Work-life balance, you do half of your emails at home. It doesn't really work. What we need is integration. How can you use the customer to get him inside, and how can we use what we push into what wonderful clients do need? It is servant leaders who connect the inside with the outside world. And it's not balanced scorecard, it's integrated scorecard. A final example, and it was mentioned also by Jürgen of Siemens, is this wonderful Lego metaphor. Do we need as leaders to standardize, economies of scale, go global, or do we need to customize? close to the customer, being local. Wrong question. The question is, how can I use what we develop locally to increase the quality of what we offer globally? And the example that Jürgen gave of the Lego brick is standardized. But the unique combination, and that's called modularization, is the client making their unique system out of standardized blocks. That's what servant leaders do. Let me summarize. The world is getting more diverse. Our leadership paradigms are bankrupt. What we need to do is increase our idea of the importance of connecting opposites. By the way, servant leaders will also say, this is not a dilemma. We have to make a choice. But if we make choices in dilemmas, we have half of our logic. And that's not working. Let me give you two last little comments. There is nothing worse than only going for speed. A wonderful John Cleese. I did some workshop with John Cleese 3 years ago. It looks like 5. And John Cleese called this hare brain, the speedy brain, that needs tortoise mind. Tortoise mind is the slow animal, the turtle. And he said, when I was working on deadlines to get my new Monty Python text or Fawlty Towers text, I felt I was getting toward the deadline and it didn't work. Nothing came out my pen. So the only thing that helped is what the French called recul. Reculer pour mieux sauter, a typical Orange expression. And it's kind of interesting because he said, I went out for 1 or 2 days, I came back to my work and it came out as diarrhea. Of good quality. And it is not harebrained speed, but speed gets more significance if you combine it with reflection and recul. The same for flexibility. If you're only flexible, you have a spine of rubber. It doesn't work. You can have great flexibility when you know where you have rigor. And that's what servant leaders do. Final point, how can you get there? 2 things. Yes, it's trainable. You can, and there are training institutes that do this, you can train servant leadership. But what I found is even much more powerful is 2 things. The metaphor, you in the room, I can see how tired you look. It's not because you're jet-lagged like myself. It is just because you have children. And when you have children, you know what servant leadership is. That you offer your service to increase their performance, and it gives you more authority. The other one is make an environment around you, your reward systems, your branding, your relationship that you develop with clients, that can only have servant leadership that will survive. And then we get this wonderful icon like Jesus Christ, a typical servant leader, but also Mohammed and other big religions, they're all servant leaders. And Jesus Christ was walking on the road, and he sees this man crying. He said, what's the matter? He says, I'm blind. He says, open your eyes and see. And the guy opens his eye and he saw. And then on the right-hand side, there's this female crying. He says, what is there? She says, I can't walk. He says, stand up and walk. And she could walk. And she was laughing, and Jesus Christ was laughing. A servant leader. Third guy on the road. He says, why are you crying? He says, I'm Dutch. And Jesus said next to him, both cried. It was a pleasure to engage you. I'm so sorry that I was stuck in another cloud than you are. But it was a delight to be here. And perhaps, Sarah, I don't know if we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Normally, we don't need questions because I'm pretty clear in my message. Thank you very much.